I am your host, William, also known as Milkman, and this is the show where we discuss the ethics in Commander. Who are you?
Yo, it's your boy, Tony the Tigre, otherwise known as Clay. How you doing? We're here to talk about Commander.
And what specifically about Commander are we talking about?
Well, we're going to talk about why you should power down your decks. And even though that sounds like the opposite of what you want to do in Commander, about why you should do it anyway, according to our opinion, because our opinions totally matter on the subject.
Definitely. And Clay has totally not played like 5 games of Commander in his life.
How dare you? I have played at least 8.
That's a pretty fair number.
I mean, every game takes 2 hours, so honestly, not a terrible amount of time.
That's probably an argument for why decks should be powered up. But I think
Well, I
it's
mean,
more of an argument for having win cons. And
Well,
we'll
here's the
discuss
thing.
that kind of later.
If everything is powered down, it's going to run about the same speed anyway.
Yes, to an extent.
If you power it up, it's two people going like full force at each other as fast as possible, which is usually how those like the main objective for powering up is to win in as few turns as possible. Can we agree on that? I would say usually. It's not always the case, but like
I mean, I don't know if that's the reason why you do it, but it's definitely like the result of it. Like you
yeah,
power up the
like
deck, what you're doing powering it up is speeding it up, basically. You're making it
yeah.
more effective at winning and being able to do that quicker. Where powering down is about the opposite. You make it slower and you make it less effective at winning.
Yeah, well, like, I think the reason that we like to power down is so that we don't end up like a sweaty nerd every time we play a turn. Like, I don't want every turn to be like 17 effects that just overlap and like infinite mana loops every time. For example, the last time that you played Commander with your Uro Commander,
Shots
that was
fired.
horrible. Every turn took for you 10 minutes, which in the end makes the game longer because it was like it wasn't powered up to the point where it was stupid, but it was still like it took so long for a turn after like turn 8 to resolve that I literally stopped paying attention until your turn was over.
To be fair for that deck was in a very limbo-like state where it was not powered up enough or not powered down enough. Where if it had a card like Laboratory Maniac or Thassa's Oracle, it would have just won at that point. But
Yeah, at that point, like, that's true.
yeah, so if it had been slightly more stronger, it would have just not had that effect and game probably would have ended way quicker. But I didn't want to win off of generating infinite mana because I thought not probably any of you all are going to have combos. So I
Yeah,
powered it
that's
down, but I didn't
true.
power it down enough. It
You
probably
had like that's part of the reason why it's hard to power down and power up because if you want to have like you don't want to be crushed obviously because that's never fun. You don't want to be like the worst ever. You all
yes.
want to be like relatively equal. At least we do for our games. But if you power up too much or you leave it too close to power, you have like it happens what happens to you. You get into like a limbo where you get like a combo, but like the combo can't do anything. So you have to find creative ways to use that combo, which then in turn takes like 10 minutes a turn.
Yeah, that's also an issue with effects like Vidalcanori, where you get
It
flash.
gets played quite a
Yes.
especially with your infinite mana thing, because like Lewis took a turn and then it blatantly like just became your and Arthur. But I mean, it's not a bad thing. Like it's certainly an effect that is okay. Because there's plenty of cards that make like sorceries have flash or something, or creatures have but like just it all depends on the balance between powering up and powering down. So since we've talked so much about what happened in our game, let's talk about why we do it just in general, like why you should do it when you play. I think one of the main reasons we power down decks is like because we want to match everyone. Because like obviously you and Arthur have better skills in deck making than me and Lewis do, as was evident in the game. But just I think you powering down is almost like a pity move, which honestly I am totally okay with because if it wasn't, then I would just not want to play. When I first started playing Arthur, like Arthur has played less than I have, but because he's so involved in Magic, he's vastly outgrown anything that I could do. And like you're right. I don't really watch a ton of videos on Commander. I've looked up theories before, like if I've saw a combo that was interesting, or I've wanted to know like if a certain tribal was viable or not, like black green elf or something, which it is, but it's like hard to get to work. I don't look it up enough to be as competitive with you guys. If I did, I would, but the powering down helps me balance that out by having a fun and interesting game, but also like having something that isn't like like four optimal decks running against each other.
No, that's completely understandable.
What else? What other reasons besides
So that
trying
was,
to match the lower power players should we like power down decks? Do you think?
I think if you have multiple decks, and this is strictly for paper, and you already have the cards. Let's say I have a deck that is running really well, and I want to power it down. And I have a deck that's kind of my pet deck, and they share some colors. Well, I can take out some of the strong cards from my quote unquote better deck and help out my weaker one that I like to play or want to try out more and help it out. So in a sense, it'll bring them both kind of closer to the playgroup's power level to where both of them will make the competition a lot better. Everyone will be able to do more, including yourself.
Like more interesting.
Yes. It'll make
Yeah,
it
I
more
get that.
fair.
You like you distribute like what you want to work. Which of course this is all on paper, and the way that we play, we don't really play on paper. Not anymore anyway.
An example of this, Seedborn Muse is an extremely good card. It untaps your lands at each other player's untap step. But if your deck cannot cast stuff at instant speed, it doesn't matter. So if you have a deck that can take advantage of that, Seedborn Muse is going to help way more in that deck. And even a slightly worse or slightly better example where the card isn't completely useless and completely just makes the deck run 3 times better. Nexus of Fate can just help any deck with blue because it's just an extra turn card, and it can kind of help with milling, where if you have it in a deck that can combo off with it, it'll weaken it a lot by just removing the win con and getting rid of an extra turn card. I think we need to discuss combos and win cons just
Sure.
here because this is kind of, it's been coming up a lot, and I feel like we need to talk about it before we go any farther.
Sure.
So this is more from our how we were going to discuss how you should power down your decks, but
Yeah.
combos aren't necessarily overpowered.
Yeah, it depends on what kind of cards you have that can combo with it. Like Vidalcan Ori and Seaborn Muse is a combo, but if you don't have like a stupidly like huge hand size, it's not terrible. Because then you can only play like a certain amount of cards per turn, and then you just run out of cards.
Okay.
But usually is well, go ahead.
What is your opinion on combos that win?
Such as
Like, okay, there is a card called Bringer of the Black Dawn, which I guess doesn't necessarily win. There's better examples, but at your upkeep, you pay 2 life and search your library for a card, put it on top. So at your upkeep, you can search for Nexus of Fate, or I think there's another extra turn card that shuffles. I'll put that up there for the
Yeah.
people watching the video.
Oh, and then you basically get an infinite amount of extra turns, right?
Yes, as long as you have the life to pay, you have infinite extra turns. So you effectively win, but not necessarily. And I think that is a very good spot to be with your combos, is like you have to have some kind of board state to win off of it.
Yeah, like you have to like I think that's a good way to combo because comboing like that doesn't mean that other players can't do anything. Because if like somebody had a counter spell, they could just counter your time thing and then your combo's over
Yeah.
until next turn. But
I mean, they can also just kill the bringer.
yeah, there's plenty of ways to remove spells
Yes.
and to remove creatures. So I think that way is not the worst. Like, is Bringer of the Black Dawn above 3 toughness?
It's pretty strong, but it's also like a 7-drop, or you need Wooburg.
But yeah, no, I could see why that would be an issue. But like, there are ways to get around it. There's plenty of like, if somebody's playing a black deck, there's plenty of ways to get rid of it. White blue control, you could bolt it a couple times and it would die. Like, there's ways to get around that, which are not impossible. I'm sure there's combos, like winning combos, that are like nearly impossible to deal with just because of how the combo works. Like, if you mill yourself out and then have like Laboratory Maniac, what's somebody gonna do? Not like make you not mill out?
Well, if the issue with that, I think, depends on the power level of your play group. Because for Laboratory Maniac, you can lose off of that if just someone has a removal spell and you can't do anything about it. Because if they kill
Yeah,
Laboratory Maniac as you're going to draw, you just lose rather
that
than
is
winning.
true.
So a lot of that is a very, I would say, more balanced combo piece, because if they remove it and they remove it at the right time, you just lose. Like, it's the exact opposite of what you want. Where other things can sometimes even be really strong without what they need to just win outright.
I guess that is true. I was just trying to find an example.
Oh, you're
How about
fine.
you give examples since you're more versed in the winning combos than I am and talk
Well,
about it?
a very big. So I have a Niv Mizzet deck. Niv Mizzet
Okay,
Perun.
I already know where this is going. It's that stupid you draw a card, you deal 1 damage, and every time you deal 1 damage, you draw a card and you get the infinite combo, right?
Yes, and the main issue is Curiosity, because it's a one-drop enchantment. So
Yeah.
for 7 mana, you can set up a win basically, but you kind of also need like an instant or
Yeah.
a way to draw. So you kind of need a third card. So it's more like a three-piece combo, or someone, if someone can't remove it in a rotation, then they lose.
Yeah.
But
Effectively, everyone loses.
I think the main issue with it is once Curiosity gets put on Niv Mizzet, you can't play an instant, because then Niv Mizzet can just ping you out in response, because it'll happen on
Yeah.
a cast trigger. So I understand the issue with it, but at the same time, you always don't have to play the combo in your hand. You can wait. Like, a lot of the time what I'll do, which it sounds very scumbaggy, but I'll just act as if I didn't draw the card. Sometimes it's kind of like a personal challenge, but you just don't play the combo. You just wait and you let people play out the game, and you play as if you didn't have it. See if you can win that way. And once you think, this game's good, but I'm done, people are getting tired, the board is kind of stalled, we want to eat or something, you just play the piece and then try to win, and then who knows, it might get countered or something and you're still playing.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, that sounds interesting. I do like that kind of play style because then you don't like blow your wad right at the start and then end the game in like 3 turns, or well, probably more than 3 turns since it's 7 mana. But like, let's say it takes 6 turns, then you don't end the game in 6 turns, and then the whole like game is 10 minutes. What? Did you not hear what I said?
I heard, I just didn't understand.
It's good that you play that way, and I wish that like because you don't blow like all of your win cons right at the start so that we like everybody has to play stupidly fast, or at least or is left behind in the dust and it doesn't want to play the game if they're left behind in the dust. And then what I actually said was talking about like how the game ends quickly if you do something like that, because then if nobody can deal with anything because everybody else's deck is powered down, then you just win. Like there's nothing a lot of people can do.
That also kind of goes into our how to power down a deck, where you can just not play the stuff that you don't have to play the cards that are absolutely walling out your opponents. Like, if you're gonna go absolutely off to the point where your opponents can't do anything and
Yeah.
it's super early in the game, just don't play it. Like, I mean, you can, but if you know like people aren't gonna enjoy the game, then you just, I would say, don't.
I think it really just kind of depends whether you're playing to win or whether you're playing for fun. And I think that's an important point to bring up when like talking about this game, because obviously like if somebody is trying to listen for why you should power your down your deck to win, this isn't to win a lot of the time, because the way that we're powering it down, not to win but to have a fun and interesting game with our friends and keep friends and not make them hate us because we play like a bitch.
We aren't playing
So
Flash Hulk.
yeah, you're not playing like, oh
That's where
God.
that's a combo where you.
I thought it was called Fish Hulk.
No. That's a new thing. Flash Hulk is a combo where you use a 2 mana spell called Flash to bring in a creature called Protein Hulk, which is a 7 drop, but it puts on the battlefield every creature in your deck that is 6 mana cost or less. So for 2 mana, you are playing every creature in your deck if you build it correctly and around that.
That's
which means
disgusting.
you have access to tons of combos and things that you probably put in there because you're playing the deck around that.
Yeah.
But you can also just put Protein Hulk in a deck that just wants to swing with a lot of creatures and then just grab all your creatures out if you pull it somehow. You don't have to build around it. And that's why Commander, it's important to discuss what kind of games you're wanting with your play group, which sounds very
Yeah.
trivial. It's like, oh, well, you want to win, don't you? No, you just want to do stuff. Like, you want to play the game.
Because you don't want like yeah, that's true. Because you don't want everybody to play like a counter spell deck, which, to be fair, does sound interesting. Like if everybody was just playing like a mono blue counter deck, that would get so stupid so quickly, and honestly would be fun. But like if everybody plays like the same thing and it gets boring or something. Like if everybody has a platinum angel on the field, what are you supposed to do about it? If you do, like
Yeah, because nobody
everybody
can win
has
or
to have
lose.
some kind of removal.
Mm-hmm.
Because like things that make it so that you can't lose or whatever like that is hard to deal with as is. And if everybody is playing them, then everybody is just stuck in this limbo where you're just drawing to hope you can get some kind of removal.
And that kind of goes into, again, why we're saying you should power down your decks. If you're noticing that people in your play group aren't running, let's say, so much removal or card draw or something that you feel or think, or even, I won't say no because that's kind of like condescending in nature, but pretty much if you notice that their decks aren't running as efficiently as they should be, where yours are hitting off in those, just swap out some of those cards. Like if they aren't drawn enough, just remove like a couple draw spells from yours to try to even the playing field. You can also have a talk with them and say, "Hey, I've noticed you aren't really drawing enough to keep up. Maybe you should power up your deck if it's one person or something." And just try to put it nicely and say, "This is what I've noticed. I really like the way your deck is and runs. I just feel like this could slightly help it."
Yeah, like that's not a bad thing at all, really. I think that's in fact a very like it's a constructive criticism thing, and it's to help everybody have like a more balanced game and have fun. And if like especially if it's like a new player or somebody that doesn't know like the combos as well, offering help and being like, "Hey, maybe you should power up the deck like," and then give a suggestion and then be like, or give like a general premise and be like, "Now go like look that up or something." And then they can find out their own ideas about it.
Ooh, Clay. So,
Yeah.
I have a very specific question. So, you just brought up new players. What about someone who doesn't have a commander deck? Because I do remember you and Lewis coming to play with me, and neither of you had commander decks. Do you feel like a powered down deck is better for someone trying to get into commander to help them learn the rules of the format? Or do you think you should give them one that's around the power level of the rest of your play group?
It depends how new we're talking. If we're talking about somebody that's never played Magic, I think you should keep it powered down just for them to understand like the principles of Magic in itself and how the principles of Magic apply to Commander specifically. Because the way that you play Commander and the way that you play like Modern are two entirely different things. Because with Modern, it's like 60 cards and you play with a bunch of sets of 4. So it's basically you having as consistent a deck as possible. That's really not as possible with Commander. Commander, it's like, how many combos can I stuff in this deck and also find ways? If you have a person that has played Magic but has not played Commander, I would say go with the one that's like roughly the power level of the group, and then just because they already know the mechanics of Magic, they could just figure out how that applies to Commander. If it's somebody that's brand new to Magic that like has no idea, like they're like, what does Death Touch mean? No, you're like, well, when they touch it, they die. So that's like that kind of thing. You give them the power down one and then work their way up until they're at the group level.
Have you ever used a commander precon?
What does that mean?
It's
Oh,
it's the pre-constructed commander decks.
oh yeah, that was my first Commander deck.
Okay, do you think someone? I feel like those are very good for people who are new to Magic to use.
I think so as well. It does always kind of depend on the deck, I think. Because, like,
What
the
about?
first deck that I got
Oh,
was, I wasn't new to the game, but I knew enough. And I got, like, a black deck that had some combos in it. And, like, you had to know how to run it correctly at the time, which, if you didn't run it correctly, you could end up killing yourself pretty quickly. It was an Ob Nixilis the Black Oath deck.
ooh.
And it was like a demon deck kind of, but there was plenty of demons that were like that would totally kill you and you own. And so then I had some of my own cards and I like substituted some ones for some better, like Pestilence Demon for like Pestilence itself, which is just an enchantment that does the same thing and doesn't kill itself after you pump it 6 times or whatever. But like those decks depend. I think you're right mostly. Usually it works pretty well because those pre-constructed decks are not complicated. Definitely not to the extent that like the top decks of Commander are, because the top decks of Commander can get over complicated real quick if you don't know the specific stuff.
Yeah, those are like
Like,
made to win turn 3. Like I've tried to look at those and I don't know how to play it. It's just even out of my league.
yeah, like legitimately, I didn't even know what the stack was until like 6 months after I started playing. Like, I had no idea why that worked. Because like I played something that would like buff a character, and then somebody would play something that was an instant speed and weaken it, and it would die. And I was like, but it buffed. I'm like, well, the stack, and I'm like, but what does that mean? So like those pre-constructed decks are good. I think probably the least friendly to new players is blue, purely because of that stack thing and how instants work.
I think
But
black is an extremely good color for new players because it has interactions with cards like murder and a lot of targeted removal. It
yeah,
also has some drawbacks that help you realize, like paying life. A lot of new players are like, why would I reduce my life? That's going to make me lose. But in essence, that's just like in Magic, if you can get to as low of a life as you can without losing, it's basically better for you because that's you have in Commander 40 life. If you use 39 of that, you're using as much of that resource as you can.
yeah. Weighing your resources, which it becomes a management game. Like, how much can I do, and like the risk or reward of something big versus not. So I think that's an important thing for players to learn. Black is incredibly friendly to new players. Green is, I think, also pretty friendly as
Yes.
well. Red can be also kind of unfriendly, just purely because of how fast it can run. And if players don't understand how fast that it can run, then it'll run slow. Because there's plenty of ways you can get red to basically abysmally slow down. Because there's like so many big red creatures, and every new player is like, wow, it's got more numbers, or it's got higher numbers, or whatever. Like, I remember there's those free decks that you get when you start the game, and it's the 60 cards, and like you get one rare, like 10 uncommons, and then the rest are commons. And the one rare for red is like, I think a 6 mana 5/5 with flying called Shivan Dragon. And then for one red mana, you can pump it to give it +1/+0.
Okay.
So it's big and it's not great because red mana doesn't really run off of having a lot of mana. So that effect is like okay, which it already takes like 6 mana to summon, which at that point, if you really want to, you can pump it to be like, let me do math, hang on, 11/5 or whatever. But just there are plenty of other ways to play red, like a goblin deck. Goblin decks run stupidly fast because goblins are like stupidly cheap. The most expensive goblins are 5, and that's like Krenko, which is overpowered.
Oh, mana wise. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean. When I say expensive, I'm talking in that sense, I mean mana cost.
Okay.
The mana cost of the Shivan Dragon, which is 6, which is a 5/5 with flying, versus like Krenko and a Goblin deck, which is 1 mana less and doubles your goblins every turn, but it's only like a 3/3. The players have to like know which is better, and since they don't understand what those effects mean yet, they obviously will just pick the one that's got a better number.
Okay.
So I think blue. What I'm the main point, because I kind of got off topic, was blue and red are kind of unfriendly to new players, and then black and green, and then sometimes white. Although I didn't really discuss white. I think white's pretty usually simple. You can. I think it's usually simple.
White is deceiving, I feel. It's extremely good for new players, but it can send them down the wrong path. Because I don't think there is about any player in Magic the Gathering who hasn't been like, I'm gonna build a deck over lifelink because then I can't die. But it doesn't work most of the time. You have to build some type of synergy with the lifelink, and you're really just using the life to do something else rather than being like, I'm gonna just gain a bunch of life.
That is true.
So there's a lot of cards that look good, like pay 1 mana or 2 or something, gain 5 life, when really it's not doing anything for you.
I think that's probably true. That I mean, I definitely built a lifelink deck when I first started, and it didn't work super well. But there are ways to get around. Like there are win cons that do it, like Felidar Sovereign, which is that cat or whatever that if you have 40 or more life at the start of your
Okay.
turn, you win. Or like, uh,
Which is also extremely
what's
powerful in Commander.
yeah,
um,
it's like, what's another life gain win con? I can't even remember.
Technically Aether Flux Reservoir, but that's more of a storm piece.
Yeah,
But I mean, if you, I don't know, somehow protected in a Johnny to gain 200 life, you're about to just wipe 3 people off the board.
yeah.
Gets too far.
So I think like an interesting card. Well, no, I don't want to trail off onto White here. So I think with the main reason we were talking about this is new players and pre-constructed decks.
Hmm.
New players with pre-constructed decks is a good idea. If you want to build, if you already have like a powered down deck, I think probably that would work better because then you could build it to the specifications you want for the new player, and like the new player could like give you feedback on what they enjoy or what they want the game to be like, and then you can basically work around what they want it to be like while also introducing like new challenging concepts. So basically, you building a pre or a powered down deck can be like you teaching them how to play the game through giving them something that isn't so complicated they like don't want to play.
I would make the argument that a powered up version of a precon deck, where basically you're trying to take out the cards that don't synergize to meet the ratios you need better of card of a certain type of card to a certain type of card, which we'll get into that probably right after this. Being able to add the synergies and take out the ones that aren't synergizing is a very good way to power up a precon, and it's effectively just a power down version of a better version of that deck that you could have built if you just went with the commander and then was like, okay, I'm gonna just put in a bunch of singles and shoot for a higher budget. So in a sense, it's
Yeah,
already like a powered down deck that you're making from powering up the precon, which is I just think powered up precons are very good for both new players and people who have played before but are just getting into commander.
I suppose that's true. I'm gonna stick with I think my opinion is that I think the precon works fine enough, or that the powered down deck works better. But I think the powered up works too.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of depends on the player and how, I don't know,
Yeah,
knowledgeable they are.
I think you
I
could
w- I don't
do.
want to say intelligence because like it's not intelligence. It's just rules.
Yeah, it's just playing a bunch.
Yeah, like I know about stuff purely from experience. Nobody gets this game naturally. Like
Mm-hmm.
this game is complicated at best.
Oh yeah, and the amount of cards in it makes it way more.
And what's interesting is that cards, and since this game is so old and there's so many cards, some of them flat out are just outdated and don't work.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of bad
Like,
ones, but there's also a lot of really strong ones.
well, I mean, there's like cards like Walk Through Time where they didn't understand how stupid it was to give you an extra turn for 2 mana.
I think a good way to put into perspective how complicated this game is this is a effectively like a board game, like a card game, and you can make. There's a video. I'll probably link
You
it in
don't
the
say. I
description.
couldn't tell it was a card game.
Okay, but there's a video where you can make a, I think it's legacy legal deck that can make a board state. This is a legal deck that is a working computer. So you can make a working
Huh?
you can there's a video. I'll link it in the description where there is a legal deck that you can have that it's not in Commander. It's in a different format. I think it's Legacy, where you can make a board state in the game with the right hand to make a working computer.
Huh? How?
You just have to watch the video. I didn't understand half of it when it was going on,
I'm
but it was
okay.
just cool.
Whoever sees this video, I'm just as baffled at this idea as anybody that's watching this. And if you know about this, like, why? Like, it's already complicated enough. Why do you need to make a computer? But I mean, if you really want to, I'm sure it's a cool thing. It's always cool to like explore the bounds of what you can do in Magic because really there because of how many cards there are, there's like an infinite possibility of things that you could do. Especially in like Legacy because Legacy is everything basically except for what like the band stuff.
Hmm.
But like even without the ban stuff, there's like a dumb amount of combos you can make with literally everything. I don't even know how many effects there are in Magic. There's effects that have been in for maybe one set and then could be like you could build a whole deck around that kind of thing and it'd still be a decent deck. Like Milkman, when we played a game and he had something that had like horsemanship, which isn't like a super printed like thing. And the effect is if something has horsemanship, it can't be blocked.
Yeah,
Or
except my
the
stuff
card
with
that he had.
horsemanship.
Yeah.
But there's
But
like
then he
nothing
had
with horsemanship, so it's
Yeah, there's like
basically unblockable.
yeah, but there's so few cards for that. But then having a card like what was it?
What do you mean?
There was a card that gave things horsemanship. I don't remember what it was.
That was
I think it was a wand.
Chuan, I think.
Well, regardless, you had a card that was like super lackluster, and then you made it a better card just from one other card, and that's two cards out of every card in Magic. So it's just interesting how simple you can make the game, and you need to make the game for new players, but how complicated you can get based on just stuff. And that's not a super complicated thing, but with the computer, like holy shit. Milkman, I've talked for so long. I hope I'm not like overloading this with my
You're fine.
inputs.
Okay. So
Milkman's not going to tell me this, but he's going to cut like 50% of what I say.
probably.
Hey, look, more stuff for you to work with in the video. You better keep my jokes, you bitch.
So I'm trying to think of a way to explain this. So to put in perspective how complicated Magic is, a normal 52 card deck has 52 factorial possibilities, which is an insanely huge number. Like 67 zeros after an 8. Big.
That's, yeah, dummy thick.
So then, take that into perspective. That's 52 unique cards. A game of Commander has your Commander, and then 99 unique cards, which would be 99 factorial possible things. But I mean, basics and stuff can kind of get into that.
Well, I mean, yeah. Most people run, what do you think? 30 basic lands, maybe?
Well, I mean, you normally put 36 lands in a Commander deck, so it just depends. Because a lot of people like basic lands just because they come in untapped, and they're not terrible. It just depends on whether you care more about getting the colors you need or running faster. But yeah, I mean, just take in perspective how many cards there are in Magic, and then how many just go into a deck, and then all the different information it becomes insanely complex to the point where basically no other game can get to that point.
Yeah.
Let's talk about ratios, because we brought that up.
Okay, this is something I have really no idea about, so this is going to be mostly you on this one.
Okay, so basically when I refer to ratios, that is like how much of each type of card you generally want in a deck. It can be changed depending on most of the time if your commander fills that kind of slot, or if you don't need that thing as much because it isn't going to care. But for the most part, this is what you want, which is normally like 36 lands. I like to run about 8 to 10-ish targeted removal cards, 13 to 16 ramp things, and then just go with synergy and some board wipes and stuff after that, just see what else I need. I'll adjust that number depending on if my commander ramps or draws me cards, or if it's my win con, I can maybe put a little bit more into that to make it more consistent with like more card draw and removal, so I don't have to worry about stuff. But good way to power down the deck is to mess with those ratios in a way that makes it less consistent. So maybe, like I said earlier, your playgroup isn't drawing enough, or they don't have as strong of draw spells as you. You just take out some draw spells. You mess with that ratio. You maybe put in some more creatures or something. If you're a lot of the time answering their stuff and they're not answering yours, maybe take out some removal. Worst comes to worst, just put in like some cards that are relatively powerful that they'll still have to answer that once you play that, but it's not going to eliminate their board to the point where if they play something stronger, it's just not gonna matter.
I think the main thing that you said, which is something that we can expand off of, is making it less consistent. Because
Yes.
with Commander, it's already as inconsistent as a format as you can possibly make it, basically.
Yeah, because it's singleton, 100 cards
You
counting
only
your
have
commander.
a single thing except basic land. You get the only thing that's consistent about Commander is your commander, and that's it. So, do you want to move on to the next thing about less consistency with like tutors?
Yes, we can talk about that.
Yeah. So with tutors, the main thing of tutors is to be consistent. Tutors, like, there's a lot of good black tutors, like Vampiric Tutor and Demonic Tutor, and I think one of those is banned. Is Vampiric Tutor banned?
Nope, neither of them are banned. Vampiric Tutor
Really?
is a one drop. I think it's instant speed, but it puts the card
Yeah.
on top of your deck, and I believe you have to reveal it. I'll put the cards up so you all can read them.
Yeah.
Demonic is extremely good because it puts it in your hand for like 2 mana. It's busted. You don't reveal it or anything.
Yeah,
It's
and you lose
extremely
like 2
strong.
life, but like 2 life is nothing in a commander game.
Yeah.
So being able to instantly get a win con like that is just so it makes it so consistent, which is a good for powering up and bad if it's you're trying to like have fun kind of thing. If everybody's running tutors, I don't think it's a huge issue because then it's better. I think because if you've already on the same power level and the only difference between the two is that you both have or one has tutors and one doesn't, I don't think it'll affect it too.
Tutors are a good way to power up a weaker deck.
Great way to power it up. There's tutors for specific card types like enchantment or artifact or whatever, which can also make it consistent because there's plenty of win cons that are based on enchantments or artifacts, sorceries or whatever. But just you basically want to make it less consistent, and an easy way to just don't have tutors in the deck. And then you can fill it in with like even if you put in more win cons, like that's not a huge idea, like that's not a huge problem.
Yeah, and you can't choose the
get the-
specific thing you need.
Yeah, exactly. Like
There's going to be
if
more
you have a
variance.
tutor, yeah, if you have a tutor and you have 2 different scenarios, you could need 2 entirely different cards. But if you just have a win con in there and you draw a win con for both scenarios, one win con could totally work for the scenario, but the other could just flat out be like a useless card at the time, which then makes it's just at that point it's just powering down the deck. Of course, we're talking about how to, which is
Yeah, just
get rid
remove
of
the
tutors. Remove the tutors, it's good. You want to power up a deck? Put in some tutors. Get rid of some stuff.
Yeah, and it won't always help it out because you need to have cards to tutor. So
Yeah, if you don't
if you have a weak
problem.
deck that
If you don't
doesn't
have win cons in your deck that can like
Well,
help
not
you
even
in
win
specific
cons.
scenarios. Yeah, or just like
Like
you
a
need
strong
situational
card.
cards.
like I couldn't tell you like okay, you're in a black blue deck. It's turn 2. You have demonic tutor. What are you gonna go get? Probably Rhystic Study. Like you're gonna draw like so many cards off of that if you can get it off. Whereas
Forgot what it did.
Rhystic Study's like 3 mana, and every time someone else plays a spell,
yeah.
you get to draw unless they pay one. I don't remember.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
But it's extremely strong, so it doesn't have to be a win con. You can grab something extremely powerful, and it doesn't even have to be powerful. It can just get you what you need. Let's say someone's just played a big creature. Oh, let me just go find a murder or a board wipe. If there's a bunch of tokens that just appeared, you can get whatever you need, and that's a little bit more of an issue in black where it's not a specific type of card, but there's enough enchantments and there's enough instants where even these other versions of these tutors where they fetch specific types can still be used in enough, and by that I mean absolutely tons of scenarios where it just absolutely eliminates the variance as long as you can get them.
Yeah. I don't really have a lot to add. I think you did pretty well just kind of explaining what to do on that.
So do you want to hit us off with the last topic for how?
Sure. This is something that I do to power down my decks so I don't like have stupidly high priced decks is working with the land that you have. And so the ratio, like, don't fuck with the ratio. Keep the land how it needs to be. But just the you use, like, there's plenty of land that's like $70 like per land, or
Oh
just
yeah, like
overpowered land. Like if you're playing black and there's a card that it like taps and you get mana to your devotion to black.
there's Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. That's one that just does devotion to any
That
color.
one is just, yeah, that one is really good.
Yeah, there's the old Urborg Cabal Coffers combo.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, especially in black, there's a lot of strong lands, but I think even just fetches and like shock lands, they're gonna be a lot faster. And if your playgroup isn't equipped to deal with that, you're gonna effectively be playing a turn faster than them because your lands are gonna come in untapped, where they're a turn behind because they don't have access to one of their lands every turn.
Yeah, especially if, like, let's say they're playing just basic stuff like guild gates or just lands that you play it and they like give you 1 life. I think they're called gain lands, I think.
Probably, or like a Scryland or
Whatever.
something.
Yeah, or like Scrylands. They're not overly powered, but they're like, a decent effect, but they come in tapped. If you have something that's like comes in or doesn't come in tapped if you have 2 or fewer land, or just pay 2 life and it's not tapped, or it comes in untapped if you control like one of the 2 colors that it is, those are infinitely better than the other ones that come in tapped, because then you are effectively playing a turn ahead, and then that one turn can make the difference. So playing with relatively the same land base will just help balance the game. And I know, like, just for a specific example, if me and Lewis were playing with the same land that you and Arthur were playing, we wouldn't do as well because we wouldn't know how to play the land that you guys play. Because I don't use a lot of like overly powered stuff. I purposely make sure that none of my land is above $5 just to be like perfectly clear on that stuff. Because like, if I play with a bunch of overpowered land, then everyone is playing with a bunch of overpowered land. In the sense of powering, it's totally fine to play with like a bunch of really expensive and very useful land. Just in this case, when you're powering down, just know your crowd, I think, is the main thing.
Yeah, that's basically just a very good way to sum up everything we've said. Just pay attention to your playgroup and even how they react to a deck. And this is something I do want to say. This isn't really targeted towards the strongest deck in a playgroup. If you have a deck that you instantly think of when you're like, ooh, that's the deck that when they play, they're probably going to win. I think that's fine to have because that gives everybody something to shoot for when powering up. I think maybe the second strongest or the third strongest, specifically if it's that same player or if they have a couple around that same power level, you can power down one. Like, I believe having a variety of power levels is way more useful than having all of them be at the same.
And interesting thing about Magic is to have fun. I think if you play to win, that's your prerogative. But in the end, I think it is a game. It's a card game. And a card game, you're supposed to have fun with it. If it's not fun for people to play, they won't play it. And if your kind of fun is to win, fine. But play with somebody else that considers. If somebody just wants to play the game and like hang out with friends, which is really why I play it, because like I'm gonna brag on Milky. Milky's a great dude, and I love playing Magic with him just because I get to spend more time with him and hanging out. I don't really give a shit if I win. It's cool if I do, but like if I lose, so what? So I think just know it's a game and don't be an asshole about it. And this is just kind of like what we've talked about is how you can be more friendly to people you're playing with.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, this whole podcast is about kind of ethics and
yeah,
the point of that at your table in the whole grand scheme of things. Since this is our first episode, we don't want to say be a people pleaser, but at the same time you need a play group to play with, and especially if these people are your friends, just make sure you're all on the same page about what you want out of the game, and then make your decks around that. If you want to have an extremely competitive and cutthroat performance, okay, fine, do that. Maybe you need to proxy or something. But at the end of the day, yeah, if you want to test out deck building, maybe set a weekly budget or something and build decks around that and see who can build the best deck or do random commanders. But at the end of the day, you have to know what you and your playgroup want out of the game. And not knowing that can make it very hard, not just playing, but even just making the deck and figuring out where it needs to be.
Yeah, I think the themes that we do within our group from now on, when we play our Magic game, we're going to have a theme associated with it. is pretty useful to understand what kind of power level we're doing. Because
Mhm.
like this week will probably be the most inconsistent because this week is just do whatever. But like every week after that, where you do your rainbow week and your goblin week and you're doing like the colors you hate the most week or whatever, which is way down the line for the series.
Mhm.
But like
I don't
just
know if we're
having
supposed to
that
give
kind
the
of thing.
things away.
The what?
I don't know if we're supposed to give that stuff away, but it's fine. This is the podcast. You know, we're thugging out here.
You can cut it too.
I'm gonna leave it
It's
in,
not
boys.
like this is. It's not like this is live. So this is a little teaser for our viewers, you know,
Heck yeah, you know, if you watch the podcast,
for our
you get,
our 3 viewers that we're gonna have.
If
Bro,
you
we're gonna
want-
blow up and they're gonna find this and they're gonna be like, dude, they were garbage. So I think that's it, right?
yeah, I think that's everything.
Thanks for listening to Talk of the Table. We're glad to have you here on our journey through Commander Ethics. If you have any questions or any suggestions, go ahead. If it's about mic quality, sorry. I'm working with a $15 conference mic here. We're going to do
Also
what we
using
can.
Discord.
What? Yeah, we're talking through Discord. I am in my parents' basement. The acoustics in here are whack. We will do our best to make sound quality as consistent as possible in these videos for the future. For right now, thanks for listening, and we hope to see you next episode.